So about 3 years ago, in around October, November of 2021, it's now January, no wait, it's March 2025, I contracted Lyme disease. And it's been an interesting experience for these past 3 years, and I just figured I'd like to share my story in case anybody out there who thinks they might have or hasn't considered it, or gets bit by ticks. It's something for you to seriously think about, and sort of insist upon with your doctor that you get tested. So around sometime in October of 2021, I ended up with a tick bite. I've had lots of tick bites in my life, never with any problems that I can tell, never any sort of reactions to them, but this particular tick bite, I got it, it was in around my belly button, just next to my belly button, a little below. And when I pulled the tick off, it was fully engorged. I don't know how long it had been on for, but it was a good sized tick. And when I pulled it off, there was a red, deep red, almost black dot from where it was attached. There was no redness or obvious, the migrants bullseye rash around the tick bite, but it hurt, and they'd never hurt before. So I didn't think much of it at the time. I just figured, okay, well, it's a little uncomfortable, it's itchy, it hurts, but it'll go away. They always do. It's not a problem. And I guess a couple weeks go by, maybe a little more, and it still really hurts. And it's getting a little bit of redness around it, but nothing serious. It's not really spreading, and again, no circle rash. So I wait a little bit longer, and eventually I start feeling really weird. I'm having all these weird symptoms that I'm not associating them with the tick bite, but I just felt off. I had a headache. My joints hurt, my hips in particular. It felt like somebody had put my pelvis in a vice and was just squeezing the crap out of it. My shoulders and neck were really stiff and sore, and I was getting these nasty headaches just above the eye and in behind the eyes, like somebody was just crushing my eyeballs. I also got the headache across the back, and I don't get headaches a lot in my life, or I haven't gotten a lot of headaches in my life before this. And usually when I got them, they were because either I'd had a little bit too much to drink the night before, or I was dehydrated from sports and activity. So this was a really strange experience. And then I was also having weird sensations where it was like, it always seemed like there was somebody sort of standing there watching me, and I'd look over and there wouldn't be in there. I know there wasn't, but it was just kind of this weird sensation of a shadow or someone being there. So I'd be constantly looking around thinking somebody was watching me, like maybe my wife or one of my kids had come up. And also I just, every now and then, like we have mice. We live in the country, and we have a lot of mice in our house. And so we're used to mice running across the floor, and they'll catch your attention in the peripheral vision, and you sort of catch them, you watch them run across. And well, I was getting that sort of thing happening as well, but there was no mice. There was never anything that I actually saw. So I started looking up the symptoms that I was having, and to my surprise, as I was sort of plugging them all into Google, all of them hit on Lyme disease. There were other conditions that might have been that came up here and there, but none that contained all of those on the same list. So I decided that I should probably go and get tested. And so I made an appointment with my doctor. This would have been around November 21st, I guess. Mid-November anyways. And I didn't say that I'm in Canada. I'm in the Ottawa Valley, which is sort of southeastern Ontario, not far from the border for the United States. Anyways, I went and sat down with my doctor and was describing the symptoms I was having, and showed him the tick bite that I had, and explained how this was unique for me, this experience with the tick bite, and that all of these things that were happening. And he was not totally receptive to the idea of Lyme being the cause of the symptoms that I was having, or that it was Lyme disease. So we talked a bit more, and he was suggesting different things like depression, because of the sort of weird moods that I was having, and other things like fibromyalgia for the pain and stuff like that. And so I got into the conversation with him. I asked him, okay, so can you test me for fibromyalgia? Because I'd been down that rabbit hole a little bit. And he's like, no, there's no actual test for fibromyalgia. It's one of those conditions that, once they've ruled out everything they can test you for, if you don't test positive for anything, then, well, for some of these symptoms, then they'll give you a diagnosis of fibromyalgia, which is a legitimate medical condition, but it's just that. They're at least recognizing that you have something wrong with you. They just can't determine exactly what it is. So that's the category that they'll put some people in. And then as far as the depression, because of the mood swings that I was having, I'm like, okay, well, can you test me for depression? And again, same thing as fibromyalgia. No, once they've eliminated all the possible things that could be causing it, I said, okay, well, can you test me for Lyme disease? And he said, of course. Well, there's tests for Lyme disease. I'm like, okay, so what's the problem here? So at the end of it all, he agreed to get me tested, but he didn't expect it to be Lyme disease. So I went and I got tested, and wouldn't you know it, the test came back negative. So now I'm like, okay, well, I don't know what's going on here, but it's not Lyme disease. I don't know what it is. So he gets the results, and we have another meeting, and he says, no, it's negative, so I don't know, we'll just sort of monitor and see what happens. And I'm like, I still think it's related to this tick, because it's starting to, it still hurts now, and it's been a while, but okay, I let it go. Well, I went on from then until I think it was August of 2022. So that's what, 8 months, something like that. November, well, it's December, January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August. So that's like 8 or 9 months. And I went back to him again because I got out of the shower one day, and I just happened to be looking down as I was drying off, and I noticed that I had some red marks on me. I couldn't really tell what they are, but it looked like I had a rash, and it was in a few different spots on my body. So I walked out to my wife and said, have I got a rash? Like, what's going on here? And she just looked up at me and she goes, oh my God, you've got Lyme disease. Apparently I couldn't really see, but I looked in the mirror, we took some pictures, but I had a bullseye sort of somewhere on my torso, bullseye rash. I had one that went, strangely it went around from my pec around onto my arm and then crossed over, but there was nothing underneath my armpit. It was just this weird, it was like I had my arm down and somebody painted a red circle on it, and then of course on my back I had a full-on bullseye. So the tick bite itself still got that black mark in it, still hasn't changed any, it's still got a little bit of redness but nothing much, so it's still really itchy and sore, no bullseye rash around it. But now I'm like, okay, so the rash is coming out all over my body, so clearly the rashes or the Lyme disease it's inside of me at this point. And well, we went through the winter and through that spring, and during that entire 9 months I had all kinds of really weird symptoms going on. I had the headache persistent for pretty much the full nine months. It came and went, but I kind of just had accepted that this is just my life now. The sore neck and stiffness, the pain in my joints, everything hurt. It just felt like every injury I've ever had in my life hurt. It's just inflammation everywhere. It just, if I had injured any part of my body, it just ached. And my hips were as bad. Energy was bad. You know, like there were periods where I would have such low energy, you know, that kind of like walk up the set of stairs and you know, have to sit down and take a break, which for me is unusual. I was a very I've always been a very active person, and you know, in my younger years I was a very high caliber athlete, and so I generally speaking, I've been in pretty good shape for my entire life, and so this was really weird. And so I'd be doing construction and building, and I'd have to be taking constant breaks and lay down because of the headaches and the sore neck. And so now I'm at the doctor and he's seeing the rash, but he's not seeing it all that well because of the fluorescent lighting, but he is recognizing that it's there. And so then he asked me a few questions, you know, so how's your neck? Is your neck sore and stiff? I said, yeah, like it's been hurting since I was here the last time. That never went away. And the headaches are still there, and the achiness. And he said, and your joints are still aching. So he asked me all those questions, basically getting all the information I gave him 9 months earlier. And he goes, okay, so there's a good chance you have Lyme disease then. But he's thinking I must have been bit by another tick. I'm like, well, I know I haven't. You know, I shower every day before bed at the end of the day, and I check my body over really well. I'm always looking for ticks, always have. And I said, so no, I haven't had another tick bite. So this is related to that tick bite I came back in for. And he says, okay, so we'll get you tested again. And he put me on the doxycycline for 2 weeks. And said, get your blood tested first and then start the doxycycline. If it comes back negative, we can just cancel the antibiotics and we'll see what we can figure out. Well, this test came back positive. So I continued with the 2 weeks, but the symptoms they almost immediately from taking the pills, like a couple of doses, within a couple of days, I was starting to feel much better, but still not 100%. That's fine. It's got to run its course. But after the 2 weeks, I still, you know, the headache was still there, the achiness, and the most important part would be the sort of, I'll call them neurological, but they're kind of psychological things that were going on that I'll get into in a little bit. But they were all kind of still there. So I called them up and said I'd like an additional dosage or a couple of weeks or whatever it is, because as I understand it, you know, 2 weeks isn't necessarily enough, and given that I've more than likely had Lyme disease for 9 months and it's systemic, 2 weeks isn't going to do it. That's for, you know, an acute case where somebody just gets bit, they get the rash right away and you give them the pills. So he agrees and he gives me another 2 weeks. At the end of the 2 weeks, most everything has cleared up. I'm feeling a lot better. The sore neck and everything is pretty much gone, and I'm feeling pretty good. But And again, I'll get into the psychological part of it because it's kind of for me, the biggest part, and it's something I'd like to address kind of on its own. But everything's good for a few months, and I don't know the exact amount of time, but I get through the summer and everything's pretty good. But just one day I just start recognizing that something doesn't feel quite right here. I'm starting to I feel like I've got Lyme disease again. It feels like the beginning stages of Lyme disease again, and I still haven't had any additional tick bites at this point, but I'm like, okay, so I do some more research and I find out, okay, that I look into it and it talks about chronic Lyme disease, or at that point I don't recall there being the post-treatment Lyme disease or whatever other terminology they're using for it right now. But I knew these symptoms are the same. I'm like, no, this is Lyme disease. This is coming back. So I talked to my wife about it as well, and she's like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Everything you're talking about is all about the same stuff. So I go back to the doctor and say, look, I don't think the doxycycline took care of this. I think I still have Lyme disease. And he says, well, no, because here in Canada, the at the time anyways, I don't know what they're doing now, but it seems like in Canada they've changed their tune a little bit. But at that time, in 2022, whatever the Canadian Institute is for medical institute or whatever that governs doctors, he cited it. He said they don't recognize chronic Lyme disease. Chronic Lyme disease does not exist in Canada. So the treatment I got, I'm cured. There's no possibility whatsoever that I can still have Lyme disease. And I'm like, well, this feels like Lyme disease. It feels exactly the same. All the stuff before, and before he didn't think it was Lyme disease, and it turned out to be Lyme disease. So long story short on that one, at the end of the debate, we went through the whole thing because I talked about the 9 months that I had, the psychological thing, and that it was still there. And again, he got into the depression, and I was also having weird kind of almost like tremors, but not really tremors, and heart palpitations. And so he went through all the different things, Parkinson's, fibromyalgia again, depression, the different things. And I said, okay, well, fibromyalgia, we've already talked about that. Once you've ruled out everything else, you just say fibromyalgia. Once you've ruled out everything that can cause depression, you call depression. So really, depression is a symptom of something. You just don't know what to call it. You don't know what it is that's causing the depression, but it's still a symptom. Same thing with fibromyalgia. There's a bunch of symptoms, but you don't actually have a diagnosis for it. You don't know what's causing it. You can't treat it. Parkinson's, same thing. My mother had Parkinson's, so I have a little bit of understanding of it, and same thing. It's once they've ruled out all the things that they can test you for that can cause the tremors, that can cause the symptoms that they're looking at, well, they throw one of these diagnoses at, which is good. I'm not knocking it for these diagnoses. These are all legitimate things. But it's essentially their way of saying, we don't know what's wrong with you. We agree there's something wrong. So we're going to do what we can, and we're going to treat the symptoms, which means they're going to sort of try and suppress them. They're going to try and get rid of the symptoms. And I'm like, well, that doesn't really help me out any. So I said I wanted to get tested again, and he was really hesitant, but at the end of it, he got me tested. And the test came back negative. However, there were markers. There was this low grade, I guess. It's almost kind of like a low grade a result that indicated that there was definitely Lyme disease there present still, or new. He said, well, you must have come into contact with another tick, and I'm like, I can assure you I haven't. So again, we ran around in a circle a bit, and still chronic Lyme disease doesn't exist. So he wasn't yeah, it's hard to keep it all straight. Anyways, I think, if I recall, I either convinced him to give me the doxycycline again. No, I didn't. So I went through a different doctor and was able to get doxycycline, and I was feeling a little bit better again with it. But since that time, so since late 2022, I've actually been bit twice more, where I immediately, as soon as I saw the tick, I had a ring around it. And so I went in and got the doxycycline, and it seemed to sort of clear it up. I didn't get any of the major symptoms kick in, but still ongoing, I've had the headaches off and on persistently since that time. So 2022 and 2022, so for 2 years. Yeah, so for at least a year since everything kind of cleared up, I've been dealing with the headaches, and the hip pain comes back sometimes just out of nowhere. Like I just get these aches and pains out of nowhere, and there's nothing to explain them. It just in the middle of the night I'll just wake up and I'll just be in pain. Like my hips will just be aching and sore. And I'm trying to figure out what I did that day that I could have injured myself or caused this inflammation to be happening. That and there's just nothing, and it just sort of eventually goes away. So I've played with the diet, and that seems to be the answer. In the middle of all this, when it was going on, the psychological part, as I've mentioned a few times, was the biggest part. And for me, it was, I've tried to explain it to my family and to my wife, who is still family, but is that there was just for the 9 months for sure, and then for probably another year after that, so into mid 2023, I recognized my family. I could look at my wife, I could look at my sons and daughters, and I knew that I loved them. I knew they were my family. I knew who they were, but there was sort of a disconnect between the knowledge of who they were and how important they were in my life to the actual emotion. The emotion kind of wasn't there. It was kind of like, emotionally, I felt distanced from them. So sitting around the table at Christmas with the whole family there and stuff, I felt uncomfortable sitting with my family, because although I could look at them and know who they are, I felt like I didn't belong there. It was hard for me to make eye contact with people. It's still hard for me to make eye contact with people, because the shortest little bit of eye contact with people seems like a really long time, and I immediately get the sensation that I'm staring at them, and so it feels awkward, even though I've come to recognize or realize that it's in most cases it's just a normal passing glance. You make a quick eye contact with somebody while you're having a conversation, or you notice that they're looking at you, but still I get that sensation that that they've been staring at me, and that they're staring at me, and I'm staring back at them, and it's really kind of odd. There's still being that, for the most part, it comes and goes, but it's mostly there, that there's kind of that sort of disconnect. I don't know how else to explain it other than it's a disconnect from emotional connection, and I only recognize it every now and then, just like with the depression part of it. You know, there's definite periods of depression that are, you know, it's not, people have told me when I describe to them that it's depression, but for me I don't feel depressed the way I picture depression being. I more feel like it's a weird feeling that there's no point. And it's not even that. It's that I recognize that there's a point to life. I recognize that there's a point to existing, but beyond that, everything else seems meaningless or pointless, if that makes any sense. It's like I'm thinking about life and what I want to do or the things that I want to do, and I'm like, well, why? What is the point of doing that? It really doesn't make sense. As long as I've got food to eat and I've got a place to sleep and keep warm and, you know, drink some water and stuff like that to meet my basic needs, I'm like, what is really the point of anything else? You know, what is the point of talking? What's the point of conversation? What's the point of you know, like today I was out here cutting wood and clearing up the land and stuff like that, getting firewood and whatnot, and I'm like, well, what's even the point of that, right? Other than maybe the firewood, because I've got to meet my needs of keeping myself warm in the winter. But you know, I like to build stuff. I like to be creative. I like to do things just for the sheer enjoyment of them, but I wasn't getting any enjoyment from it because I just thought, what's the point of this? Why am I doing this? This is stupid. This is just filling time, and why do I need to do that? You know, so it made it difficult. You know, what's the point in getting out of bed, right? So I guess as I talk about it, it sounds like what people talk about for depression. So yeah, but it would be there, and then as far as I know, nothing changed, but I didn't feel that way as much. It never fully went away, but it's just, of course, having said all this, there's nothing that I can do. I can't say definitively that it's the Lyme disease that's causing it. There is no way for them to test for long-term, post-treatment, chronic, whatever you want to call it, you know, persistent Lyme disease. There's a lot of research out there. There's a lot of data that supports the fact that there's Lyme disease. I've spoken to a woman who wrote a book. She lives nearby here. She has a PhD. I'm not sure what in, but I had a really long conversation. I was on the phone with her a couple of hours because, you know, her marriage fell apart because of Lyme disease and stuff they went through, and it was just nice to be able to talk to somebody one-on-one who had been through it, because she kind of understood. And you know, I just listened to her story, and while I'm listening to it, I'm thinking, yeah, like that's just, you know, I can relate, you know, I get it, and she understood mine. So it, you know, although there was differences because not everybody has the same symptoms or the same response, there's so many similarities that it was really I don't know what the word is right now. That's another thing, is like my ability to recall words is, you know, everybody has this. I know it's ongoing, but words literally disappear for me. Names disappear. There's people that I've worked with, people that I've known forever, my own family sometimes. Or I'm looking at them and I literally just cannot think of their name. I know them, but the name's not there. It's just gone. I can't find it. It's not like where you're struggling, where, you know, we've got 3 kids and I go through the names, you know, like these aren't my kids' names, but I'll say, you know, Billy, John, Ian, Steve, right? Because you're just sort of running through all the names and you eventually stumble on it. It's just gone, and so our word's just gone. And so now, as you see, I've kind of gone off on tangent and I've lost my train of thought because I couldn't think of the word for when I was speaking to this lady who'd had Lyme disease, and anyways, it'll probably come to me eventually, maybe, I don't know. What I'm trying to say is that it was validating. There we go, validating is the word. It was validating because, you know, even people close to you have a tendency to say, okay, well, no, like this is, there's not enough evidence to say, you know, it's not in the mainstream enough, that if they don't do the research and if they don't do their own work, you know, it's very easy, just like I was with fibromyalgia when my mother was diagnosed with it 20, 30 years ago at least, you know, and at the time when it was sort of a new diagnosis and a new terminology, but it wasn't in the mainstream medicine. It was in, you know, it was in the holistic medicine, right? And at the time, you know, holistic medicine, what's that? That's not science, that's not real. You know, I was a kid and stupid, but, you know, so I didn't believe fibromyalgia. Yeah, that's just bullshit. There's nothing wrong with you, because I fell into that. And so I can understand that people would feel that way, but now that it's getting more attention here in Canada, people are starting to understand and you know, that it doesn't have this, you know, it's only been a couple of years for me, which is so unfortunate, but it didn't have the stigma that it, for some people, it had. I'm glad that I didn't have to go through that, but anyways, it's starting to get kind of cold out here, so finally what I'd like to say is that there are ways to mitigate it. Recently, the past week or so, I've decided to go on an all meat diet. I figured it was the best way for me to eliminate the inflammation from my body, because I did notice that there were times when, if I was taking drugs that were anti-inflammatories for larger amount, like stronger ones, and even with the ibuprofen, that it would even alleviate some of my other symptoms. So without consuming any sugar or carbohydrates of any sort, inflammation kind of feeds off of that, and it turns out that the spirochetes, which is the bacteria that causes Lyme disease, it's the way it operates is it can get into places and hide, apparently. So it gets into the joints, deep inside the joints, where the drugs can't get at them. So if it's been in your body for long enough, as it was with 9 months, it can get into those places where now the drugs can't actually eliminate it. And then when you've got the right environment for it, well, it can come out and cause problems for you. So the all meat diet, yesterday was probably the first day, or it's been about 2 or 3 days now, that all of a sudden I'm starting to feel like myself again. I thought I was myself again, but I wasn't, and I'm just recognizing that today, in fact, which is why I decided to sit down and do this video. It's gone on for quite a bit. I know I've been talking for a long time, but I truly believe, anecdotally anyways, that you've got to do whatever is necessary to manage the inflammation. And like I said, without the sugar in your body, you know, it's the inflammation, you know, it feeds off of, and so do the spirochetes. The bacteria feeds off of sugar. Yeasts, all these things feed off of sugar. So if you've got sugar in your body, I noticed myself, when the symptoms would come back stronger, it was eventually, looking back on it after I dealt with the symptoms for a while, not recognizing that they were back, and then realizing, oh shit, you know, because there's this anger, this rage as well that I didn't talk about, that I had to deal with, where just out of nowhere I would just be so angry for no reason, which is going to obviously make it complicated dealing with people, because I'll snap at people or behave upset with people when I'm not upset with them. I was angry before they interacted with me, to the point that for no apparent reason, like, I'm looking around wanting to break stuff. Just this intense anger that I would have to sort of go and be by myself and work through it, and then it would subside, and then it would be gone. So dealing with all that, I would be able to look back and say, oh wait, no, I just realized that I had been eliminating or keeping my diet as anti-inflammatory foods as I could, but then something happens, you have company, I have a beer, or have a bunch of chips and then because I haven't had them for a while, I get cravings, and then I realized that I had been eating too many of them. I went on, and now I've got the inflammation is back because I was eating all of these foods that were just loading my system with sugars and starches and carbohydrates. So that would be, I guess, my suggestion, is pay attention to that. If you have Lyme disease and you're struggling with it, or you think it's there, and get yourself tested. It's tough. It really is tough. It's not an easy thing. You don't always know it's happening. You don't always know you're dealing with it. But when you do, when you start recognizing it, it can really mess you up. So make sure you get some help. Talk to people. Share with people what's going on. And make sure that you just keep pushing your doctor. And reach out to all resources that you can find. I'm not an expert on this, obviously. This is just, like I said, it's anecdotal. But I've been through it. I've tried a bunch of different things, and I think I'm finally getting a hold on it. I'm getting it under control. In all likelihood, this is it. This is something that I'm going to have to deal with for the rest of my life, from some of the research I've done, unless they come to the conclusion that, yeah, this is legitimate. It's a real thing that they're going to have to treat or find a cure for, and they can convince people that it's worth putting the money into. But unless the pharmaceutical company can, and I don't really like pharmaceuticals anyway, so I've pretty much accepted that this is on me now. So I was going to say that if you have any questions, leave your questions in the comments, and I'll do my best to sort of help if I can. Like I said, it was really, really good. Probably one of the best things for me when I got to talk to that other woman and speak to other people. And also, I've noticed more recently that my family, because there's other people that my family knows that is turning out, they're hearing their stories of having Lyme disease, and them expressing the same things I was going through. So it's just a matter of education and people understanding and getting to know what's going on, so that they can. It makes a big difference when your family can hear the stories from other people as well, so that it's not just you, and it's not just this weird thing that when they look into it, there's all these official sites that are saying no, it doesn't exist. That's not what it is. It's depression. It's all these other things that that are symptoms of something, but they're saying, well, it must be that because it can't be Lyme disease. I've rambled on a lot, and I don't know. I just hopefully this can help somebody. Just doing it's helped me, obviously. Just talking about it like this. I've talked about it with a number of people, but still, it always feels good to talk about it. Yeah, so like I said, leave some comments. More questions in the comments or whatever, and maybe we can reach out and contact, and I can give you whatever information I have. And another tip is, for me anyways, anecdotally speaking, caffeine and alcohol are a no-go. Alcohol in particular for me, you know, I'll have one beer in the afternoon at lunch, a late lunch or something, and the next day I wake up and I feel like I'm hungover, like I've got a major headache and I'm lethargic, I've got no energy and stuff, and it's just from one beer. And I've tested this a bunch of times, and yeah, just the smallest amount of alcohol and it sets me off. So it's definitely a lifestyle change you're looking at. So be prepared for the long haul. Don't look at this and think that you're going to be able to make these little changes in your life, get rid of the inflammation, and everything will be good. You know, of course, I'm talking to the mirrors here because I'm just speaking from my own experience, but from other people that I've spoken to and other research, it's ongoing. I'm going to stop there. 40 plus minutes is long enough. Like I said, I hope this helps somebody. And reach out if you need somebody to talk to, or if there's anything you think I might be able to point you in the right direction or something. Anyway, so take care, and take care of yourself. All right, cheers.